So what's the single overarching objective for any commercial enterprise? And more than anything else, you want to make money, right? And you want to make money over what time horizon? Long term. You want to make as much money as you can today, tomorrow, the year after. And if we recognize the time value of money, recognize that today's dollars are worth more than the dollars 10 years from now, and we do some discounting, okay, if we take the net present value of the firm, that in theory, if our finance colleagues are correct, should be the shareholder value of the firm. So everything else is just a matter of maximizing that. Agreed? Okay. And how have we traditionally done it? And most companies, in fact, all companies today, are still doing it this way. And as a little hint, let's give a big shout out to Henry Ford, who wasn't really the first to do something, but really popularized it and changed the way businesses work. And it was this whole idea of, let's come up with an idea and let's produce a whole lot of it. Because producing a lot of it is not only going to give us an opportunity to sell a whole lot, but that art of producing a lot of it and doing so efficiently is also going to, it's going to lower our costs as well. Right? So that's the way most businesses work. And I'm not just talking about cars, and I'm not just talking about products, I'm talking about services as well. That's the way an academic institution works. Like, let's bring through as many students as possible. Okay? Volume's a good thing. We can do so at greater efficiency. That's the way business works. Right? Of course, as a manager, you're not only rewarded for doing this thing, turning that crank as efficiently as possible, but your shareholders want more. They want growth, right? So where does growth come from in this traditional business model? Well, there's really two answers to that question, but they could be lumped together with these words over here. It's taking this product expertise that we have. We're really good at conceptualizing and developing and manufacturing and distributing a certain kind of thing, a product or service. Okay, we're really good at that. So we can extend it in two ways. We can either go to the R&D people and say, give us another good thing. Okay, so take that product expertise goodness and extend the product line. Come up with a new improved version. Right, so that's one way of extending our product expertise. And the other way is to take this goodness that we've been producing and bring it to new customers who haven't had the luxury of enjoying our wonderful products and services yet. Right, so very different tactics that get us there, but in both cases, it's this idea of taking that great product idea and extending it outwards. You with me on that? Okay, makes a lot of sense. So that's where growth comes from. I don't need to say much about this. Every company on the planet has a product-oriented organizational structure, right? We organize around those different products and services. And the bottom line, for most businesses, the source of competitive advantage for most of the last century, if not longer, has been product expertise. Again, we are the best at producing this thing. We do it really well. We're always a step ahead of the competition. We're always finding new ways to tweak it and new customers to bring it to. Hooray, hurrah. Great. This was known as business. Today, we're going to put a more specific label on it. We're going to call it product centricity. Again, those words aren't new, but there was no reason to have to come up with a label for these practices until a new way of doing things started to emerge. It's sort of like a fish swimming around, doesn't know it's in water until it jumps out and it says, uh-oh, I'm in a different environment now. I think I like the old environment better. Okay? This is what companies are going through today. For various different kinds of reasons, there's occasionally popping their heads out and saying, you know what, there are other possibilities out there. I'm not sure I like them. Okay? There's this tried and true way. Well, I want companies not necessarily to jump out of the water, because that could kill you, depending on what kind of fish you are, but I want them to be aware of what that other world looks like. Because for some companies, it might be better. So I'm not pushing this idea of customer centricity, which we haven't defined yet, but I want companies to make an informed decision about whether, when, and how to move in that direction. And one of the reasons why relates to the title of this next slide over here, which is, let me first pause and give a shout out to someone else's book, a wonderful book by a gentleman named Jay Galbraith. You can't see it, it's an eye chart. There's nothing new on this slide. It tells you all the traditional ways of being a product-centric organization, the kinds of metrics that you use to tell how well you're doing it, market share, number of new products, the organizational structure, and so on. I just want to call attention to one piece here, because I'm going to draw a contrast to it later on. And towards the bottom, you'll see the mental process, this idea of divergent thinking. How many possible uses are there of this product or product expertise? As I said before, growth comes from taking that product expertise and spreading it out. There's a few things going on today that weren't really going on, say, 25 years ago, that don't necessarily ruin product centricity, but take some of that can't-miss success away from it. It used to be you turn that crank, high volume, low cost, count the money. It was that simple. But there's a bunch of things going on today that just take some of the shine off of it. Things like, and again, I don't want to interrogate you about it. I think you'll agree with these points. It's just a question of how important they are. Do they change everything you're going to do with your business? Things like commoditization. A lot of product centricity was all about having a natural monopoly. We came up with this idea, we're sitting on top of it, we're raking in the dough as a result of it, and part of it was because we could always stay a few steps ahead of everybody else. But today, you know what's going on because of technology. As soon as we come up with an idea, boom, everybody else has it. And sometimes other firms have it even better than us before we can fully leverage that new product idea. Okay, if we think about also on the demand side, there's a lot of differences. Our customers are different today than they were before. They're a lot smarter. It used to be that we would just push stuff out the door and we'd leave it up to the customers to figure out how it solves their problems or how to make it work with other products and services. It was their problem, okay? But it's our problem today because we have these much smarter, much more demanding customers who are aware of options, okay, and are willing to work harder to get them. Technology also hurts us. It ruins that natural monopoly because in the old days, even if there was a better product or service, the customers wouldn't know about it because they weren't that smart, and they couldn't get access to it anyway. All right? And so we could continue to ride our local monopoly. But today, thanks to the UPSs and the FedExes, everything is available everywhere. This whole idea of globalization just changes everything. Deregulation. So you think about industries that many of you are involved in. So let's say financial services and so on. It used to be, when we were young, highly, highly regulated. You didn't have to be quite as nimble as today. And again, back to the customer mindset, it's not only that people are aware of options that they weren't aware of before, but their whole mindset is very, very different. The customers are now saying, no, don't just sell me stuff. Tell me how it's going to solve my problem, right? Think about our kids, all right? So I have a daughter who's a sophomore at Penn right now, and a 17-year-old, and kids are very different today. We like to say they're empowered, but what we really mean is they're spoiled, right? I mean, think about how it was when we were kids. You could give me a rock, a rubber band, and a paper clip, and I get a fun for days, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? But today's kids, today's empowered youth, they know what they want, and damn it, they're going to get it. In the form they want, at the time they want, through the distribution channel they want. It's not up to us anymore, right? And the problem is today's kids are tomorrow's customers. It's not like all of a sudden they're going to grow up and have fun with rocks and sticks and rubber bands. No, they're going to carry those values with them. So a lot of companies today are now solution providers. A great example would be IBM. What did IBM used to stand for? IBM. International Business Machines. Do you know why? Because they used to sell business machines. They really did. Okay, and they did so internationally. And some of you might know this story, but in the mid-1990s, a salesperson was meeting with a customer, and it was her job to kind of sell this customer an IBM server, but she realized, you know what, this customer's needs will be better met if I actually sell them a Sun server. And they'll actually show them that I'm a trusted advisor, and they'll actually stay with us and buy more stuff from us. So let's sell them this other product instead. And what do you think happened to that salesperson? She was probably fired. Right? You sold them what? Okay? But that's our beginnings of customer centricity. And IBM realized that, you know what, it makes more sense for us to be a solution provider, which is nice words for a consulting firm, as opposed to producing products that are quickly and easily commoditized. Right? So an uber product-centric firm like an IBM basically stopped creating and selling products and started just telling people how to glue stuff together, telling them what products they ought to buy, regardless of which vendor was producing them, and finding there's a lot more money to be made doing that than selling them things. That's what I'm talking about over here. And part of that's a reflection of the sign of the times, different kinds of customers, different opportunities. I got one more reason, though, one more point to raise. I got some white space on the slide over here. It's the point that I personally care about the most. I don't want to suggest it's the most important, but it's near and dear to my heart, and that's the data. Okay? So Henry Ford didn't really know. Was he selling one car to each of 10 million people? Or was he selling 10 million cars to one person? He didn't know, and he didn't care. Why? Because all he wanted to do is to turn the crank, produce a lot of volume, shove stuff out the door, and let other people worry about it. But today, it's just handed to us on a silver platter to be able to track individuals and know who's doing what and for how long, and wow, it's just great. Now, I want to be real careful about this point, because I don't want to suggest, if you think about it very carefully, this point is not really a crack in product centricity. This point by itself doesn't say, uh-oh, product centricity is doomed. A product-centric firm can use its data and do its product-centric thing more effectively. So this is a different kind of point. In some sense, this is a window, a portal to a different world. This is the fish jumping out of the water. This is like, you know what? Maybe we can build a business model around that data instead of building a business model around the products. Maybe, just maybe, we can do that. And there's a lot of nice examples of companies that have done just that. Many of you would be familiar with these examples. Harrah's Casinos, Tesco, the biggest grocery retailer in the UK, and the one that surely all of you know about, the Oakland A's, Moneyball. What do these three organizations have in common? Different sectors, different geographies. What they all have in common is that they were also ran second-tier players within their respective industries. They could not compete on the usual product-centric thing. They were just boxed in. They didn't have pockets as deep enough as their large rivals. So out of desperation, they said, we got nothing. Let's turn to the data. And let's build a business model around those customer relationships. And let's not just collect data, but let's draw deep, meaningful insight about who is likely to do what, when, for how long, and what we can do to change that behavior. So some of the stories about Harrah's Casinos, if you're familiar with them or not. So it's not just a matter of collecting the data, but Harrah's knows that when Kimball is sitting at the table, at the blackjack table, that his limit is about $150, and that when he hits about $150, he's going to leave. Okay, and then he's going to go home, and he's not going to come back for a long time. And he's going to tell people about what an unhappy time he had there. Right? Bad things will happen. So they know that they need to intervene when he's down about $100. And based on his past behavior, not only at the tables, they know what his preferences are for different kinds of rooms and different kinds of entertainment and food. So they'll come up to him at just the right time and say, oh, they got the steak that you like, and oh, Barry Manilow is here, and we know that you like his music. And you go and you enjoy all this stuff. Say, I know a lot about you. And then you sit back down at the table later that night, and your mental account is back to zero. It all starts again. So it's using that data in a very, very well-informed and non-creepy way. I mean, the execution of these tactics is very, very difficult and risky. Okay, so those are the kinds of stories I'm talking about. Build the business around the data, not just the data, but a deep understanding of the nature of the customer relationship. That's the portal to this other world, and that's really where I want to go. So I know you're just dying to see my definition of customer centricity, but I'm going to tease you just a little bit longer. I want you to come up with your own definition, all right? So I really do this with my MBAs. I make them write something down. I'm not going to do that to you over here, but I'm going to do it implicitly. So on this next slide, I have 4 different retailers. They're all fine, wonderful firms. I have deep respect for all of them, and most of you have deep respect for them too, I'm sure. But the question is, why do we have that respect? Which one or ones of them would qualify as being highly customer-centric? So come up with your own definition of what customer centricity means. Come up with that scale of what's high versus low on customer centricity, and ask yourself, which of these would be pretty high on that scale? So I want to take a quick straw poll just to see what you say about that, and then we'll dive in just for a couple of minutes on it, okay? So how many of you say that Walmart would qualify as being highly customer-centric? How many say with Walmart? Any hands for Walmart? 1, 2, 3. 3 hands for Walmart. How about Nordstrom's? Oh, a lot of hands for Nordstrom's. Can't even count them. How about Apple? More than Walmart, less than Nordstrom's. And how about Starbucks? Middle amount as well. You know what the right answer is? None of them. And do you know why? Because I said so. Well, no, I think you want more than that. Let's go down the list real quick. Walmart. So how many of you are members of the Walmart loyalty program? How many of you have your Walmart loyalty card and would admit it? Any of you have your Walmart loyalty? Really? No one? Well, that's because Walmart doesn't have one. Right? What kind of retailer doesn't have a loyalty program? Okay? Well, a retailer like Walmart. Because what is Walmart's business model? High volume, low cost. And having a loyalty program would be overhead. It would be more cost. If they started sending different messages to different people, expensive. You can't do the volume cost thing. It's in the way. It's just not mission critical for them. So Walmart actually knows a lot about its kind of average customer. Walmart knows, here's a timely example, that when a hurricane's about to hit, they know that they need to stock the stores full of, someone said beer, that's good. Water, batteries, flashlights, yeah, all that. But does anyone know the story I'm telling here? Walmart knows that when there's a hurricane about to hit, they need to stock the stores full of Pop-Tarts. Who said it? Oh, because you read the book. You read the book. Strawberry pop. Yes, Walmart knows that they sell a lot of Pop-Tarts during hurricanes. Now, but they don't know who's buying them or necessarily what flavor. See, that's the difference, is they know a lot about kind of the average customer, but they don't know on a customer-by-customer basis who are the good ones and who are the not-so-good ones. Okay? So they're very, very product-centric, high volume, low cost. They're doing a few things. I could say this on good authority. My brother-in-law is their vice president of point-of-sale systems, so I know a little bit more about what's going on there. They're making some little baby initiatives in this direction, but it's not top of the list for them. Now, most hands went up for Nordstrom's. Can someone tell me the apocryphal story about why Nordstrom's is so amazingly customer-centric? What's the story? Tires, right? Someone apocryphally, although it might be true, you check Snopes and Urban Legends, and it seems like it might be true. Someone walks into the Nordstrom's in Fairbanks, Alaska, and says, I don't like these tires anymore. I want my money back. Nordstrom's has never, ever sold tires. Nordstrom's gives this person their money back. Now, is that customer centricity or what? I say, or what? I say that's actually kind of dumb. That there's one circumstance when it would make sense to give someone money back for a used product that you never sold them. When would that make sense? If that customer is so incredibly valuable that if you didn't give them money back for the tires, they would take their business and go elsewhere. Give them the money back for the tires. Okay? So if it's a really valuable customer, and I'm not just talking about past value, I'm talking about future value, give them the money back. It's a small price to pay. But most customers are not that valuable. So if a random customer comes in and says, here, take these tires back, the chances are that they're probably not worth it. The right customers would be, but most of them. So again, maybe they were very, very savvy. They knew who to give the money back for the tires they didn't buy there, but probably not. And the idea of just rolling out that red carpet for each and every customer, I say, is grossly inefficient. When I walk into the Nordstrom's, they treat me wonderfully well, and that's the problem. Because I buy like everything in Nordstrom's, they should be treating me better. When I walk into the store, they should be shoving people aside and say, here comes Pete, get out of the way. And I'm only half kidding about that. I'll say more about that. Apple. Before Steve Jobs passed away, didn't you ever get the phone call from him asking like what you wanted in a shiny electronic object? Any of you get that call? He never called any of you to ask what you wanted? Well, you all know the story on this, right? Because Steve Jobs didn't care, right? Because he was actually going to tell you what you wanted before you even knew you wanted it. He was right. Okay? So the issue with Apple is that, sort of like Walmart, but in a different way, they're an uber product-centric firm. They're just so amazingly good at taking their product expertise and extending it in different interesting ways, and they're saying, let them line up around the block. They're not showing any favoritism to their high-value customers. And you know why? Because they can. They can get away with it, at least for now. You know, eventually, the shine will come off of Apple as well, and at that point, they're going to have to be a little bit smart about which customers deserve special treatment, which ones don't. And they're doing a few little baby steps in that direction now, just to be ready for it. And you also know that when that time comes, they'll probably do that really well, too. But it's just not top of the list for them. And then there's Starbucks. They frustrate me the most. So any hardcore Starbucks fans over here? Who would admit it? Okay, Lizanne. Okay, so Starbucks has a loyalty program. And if you have your favorite Starbucks and you go into that store, the barista, the person on the other side of the counter, knows everything about you. Not just your coffee preferences, but what movies you like, what books you read, just clothing that you wear. The person behind the counter is very customer-centric. The person behind the counter is willing to have a very deep and broad relationship with you. That's great. But here's the problem. You take your gold Starbucks loyalty card and you go to, I don't know, let's say Kansas City. Anyone from Kansas City? Can I insult Kansas City? No, there's nothing wrong with Kansas. You go there and you say, here's my card. I'd like the regular, please. And what will you get? You get a funny look, right? Who are you? That's the problem. At Starbucks, their baristas are amazingly customer-centric, but they do nothing to actually capture and leverage that knowledge. In contrast, you go to a Ritz-Carlton, and you pull up, and the valet asks you your name, and you know that by the time you get to the counter, your keys are waiting for you, and they're not going to make you go through the whole rigmarole of what you're looking for. They'll say, we got the room you like with the view of the river, we got the special kinds of pillows, we're not going to have housekeeping disturb you tomorrow. They know this stuff based on your past behavior and your stated preferences. They're databasing it all the time, doing it in a non-creepy way, and then making recommendations to you that based on your preferences, here's some other stuff that we'd like to surround you with as well. That's what I'm talking about. Being able to walk into a Starbucks and swiping your card and pressing the regular please button, and then, by the way, it'll make recommendations about new sandwiches and new music or whatever else that would go well given your taste and your history. To their credit, they're taking little baby steps in this direction, but it's not mission critical. If you speak to Howard Schultz, or if you play a word association game, I say Starbucks, you say, well, that's part of the problem, coffee. Coffee is easily commoditized. Their coffee is no better than anyone else's. I think you'll agree with that. I say Starbucks, you say, what is it that Howard Schultz wants you to think about? Experience, atmosphere, right? It's all about that special feeling in the store. Well, you know what? That's commoditizable as well. And the other chains that are knocking off that experience are doing pretty well. The thing that can't be knocked off is that relationship with the customer. And again, they're doing little things in that direction, but it hasn't been top of the list for them, not yet. So you start to get the idea of what customer centricity is as we walk through these examples. Let me give you the definition now. The definition is just going to look like blah, blah words on a page, so here's my quiz for you. As you look at this definition, oh my goodness, I got to give you my quick couple of examples over here. One of the things I love to do is to see what companies are saying and doing in the mobile, with their iPhone apps. So what is Nordstrom's doing with its iPhone app? Well, I know it's hard for you to read this, but I'll tell you what it says. We're taking a wonderful service experience and we're making it even better. The red carpet's even redder, plusher than it ever was before, thanks to our mobile app. Okay. Let's see what their evil arch rival, Neiman Marcus, is saying. Okay? Same thing. Mobile app, basically the same store. It sells the same stuff. But the way that they position themselves relative to the customer is very, very different. So let's read this one together. Let's start with the bottom line. Neiman Marcus recognizes that the key to a terrific retail experience is, read with me, personal and differentiated service. Let's treat different people differently. In their app, just like anyone else's app, your phone gives off a unique signal when you walk into the store. You walk into a Neiman Marcus, and if you're part of this program, your Facebook photo comes up. They know who you are. They will ping, they will bring up your history. They will ping the right sales rep who will basically say to whatever customers they're working with, excuse me, I have a better customer walking in the store in a non-creepy way and come serve you. That's what I'm talking about. The technology is the same. But it's just the idea of saying we are going to treat different customers differently depending on what they're worth to us. That's what I'm talking about. That's customer centricity. Okay? So here's our definition. And as you read this definition, you either say, yeah, fine, whatever, okay, I got you, yeah, great, let's do this. But if you think about it really carefully, all right, if you were to take this definition and go back to your office and start really, truly doing this stuff tomorrow, you will be fired for a bunch of different reasons. So what are the fireable offenses that are listed up here? Let's just review them real quickly. Number one, the idea of having a select set of customers, that some of you are worth more to us than the rest. Okay? Henry Ford would be rolling in his grave. Wait a minute, you can't do that. All these customers are really, really valuable because we need lots and lots and lots of volume in order to get our costs down. But we're saying, you know what? If we can figure out who the right group of customers are, who are really valuable, and I'm talking about future value that we can create and extract, it actually might be worthwhile for us to operate on a lower volume and to treat some customers, not that we want to chase anyone away, don't get me wrong. We don't want to treat anyone badly, but we do want to acknowledge the differences. And if you think about it for a second, while this sounds like a really radical idea and a fireable idea, if you think about it more broadly, this is the way business works in most parts of the world. Okay, so just this past summer, Brett and I were over in Turkey. Okay, now we didn't go visit the Grand Bazaar together, but how many of you have ever gone to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul and tried to buy a rug? Do you think that they charge you the same amount as they charge the person ahead of you online and behind you online? Of course not, right? They're sizing you up. They're deciding whether you're a repeat customer or a one-time tourist who they could gouge, right? They're looking at you and deciding what you're going to be willing to pay, and then charging you accordingly. That's smart. That's the way business works in most parts of the world. And the homogenized customer experience that we've brought here recently, only over the last 100 years, that's entirely unnatural. And that was only done to do this whole volume thing because we couldn't differentiate these customers from one another. But today we can, and we should. Okay? We have the technology, and therefore companies have a fiduciary responsibility to be doing that. Yes, it has its risks, but it has its upsides as well. So the select set is a difficulty. What else is difficult here? The bottom line is a problem. So here's the way it works. CEO does their quarterly call with investors on Wall Street and says, long term, long term, long term, blah, 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 long term, long term, long term. That's what every CEO call says, right? And then the CEO comes back to the building and says, okay, people, we got quarterly numbers to hit. Enough of that long-term stuff. We got a business to run. You know what I'm talking about? There's that fundamental disconnect between what a company is supposed to do and what it does in the product-centric world. The nice thing about the customer-centric world, and again, I'm not saying you must be doing it, but one of the upsides, if you choose to go in that direction, is that there's a natural alignment between what you're doing with the customers and what it is that your shareholders want you to be doing. You know, back to that IBM story. Let's figure out who the right customers are, and let's invest in them. We're willing to lose a little bit of money on them because it's going to be worth it in the long run. There's a more natural alignment between the tactics and the broader strategies. All right, so there's a couple of other fireable offenses up here, but I think you're getting the idea. It is radical. And even if you buy into it and you say, you know, damn the torpedoes, we're going to do it, you have to realize that there's a lot of other changes that are involved with it. It means changing everything. And I don't have all night to talk about all those changes. Let me just talk about one or two. You go visit a company. You park in the really nice spaces right up front, the visitor spots. And what spaces are right next to the visitor spots? No, not the CEO. They go to the helipad in the back. The salesperson of the month. Okay, and to your point, how is the salesperson of the month chosen? It's the person who sold the most stuff last period. I say that's a mistake. Okay, because if you want to win the salesperson of the month, let's find people who are inclined to buy a lot of stuff and get them to buy stuff that they were going to buy anyway. Well, don't reward someone for that. The salesperson of the month should be chosen future-looking lifetime value. Okay, let's take customers who weren't really worth that much and make them a little bit more valuable than they were otherwise. Let's really work on those prospects for the long run as opposed to hitting the quarterly numbers. So let's come up with their future lifetime value projection and see who boosted that the most. That's what it should be based on. It's more difficult. It involves a little math. It involves some data. Okay, we can do that. We're Wharton people. We're smart. We can handle that. That's a source of competitive advantage. Okay? So I really do want to base it more on the future than on the past. Okay? And that's going to be where the incentives come from, performance metrics, and so on. A lot of the words that we now start using in a more commonplace manner, customer satisfaction, loyalty, and retention, and all that stuff, it's bringing clarity to those things and raising them to a higher level in the organization. And I'll say a little bit more about them as well. So let me give you the overview of what this customer-centric world looks like over here. First and foremost, in contrast to product centricity, what's the single overarching objective? Above all else, we want to do what? Satisfy customers? Nah. I mean, yeah, that too. That's a means towards an end. Find out who the good customers are, yes, but it's a means towards an end. But ultimately, what do we want to do more than anything else? We want to maximize shareholder value. Does that look familiar? It should. I want to emphasize that what we want to achieve is exactly the same thing. There's a lot of companies that reject the notion of customer centricity. They think it's like communism. Okay? They think that product centricity equals maximize shareholder value and vice versa. Okay? They think the only way to maximize shareholder value is to come up with blockbuster products. I'm suggesting that thanks to the data and these newly arising perspectives, there's another path to get there. Finding those select customers, treating them well, creating and extracting value from them. It's a different path to get to the same place. Okay? So we have the same ultimate objective, but the way that we get there is very different. So the way that we get there in the product-centric world was, and is, what was our second bullet point earlier? Volume cost. What is it in the customer-centric world? If we think about all the stories that we've told, IBM, Harris, Tesco, other companies you know about, or some of the bad stories, what they're lacking, what's the common theme across all of them? In other words, what is it that we're celebrating in the customer-centric world? In the product-centric world, we're celebrating volume. We're celebrating blockbuster products. But in the customer-centric world, we are celebrating differences across customers. We're celebrating heterogeneity. See, in the old days, and in fact today, we talk about the average customer. The average customer buys this, the average customer likes that. And then you come to the realization, you know what? The customers are actually kind of different from each other. And the first time you realize that, that's actually a nuisance. It's a problem. Okay, think about a lot of companies that are trying to apply Six Sigma. You have a Six Sigma black belt, and you can apply it to a manufacturing facility. We want every widget coming off of that machine to be identical. No defects. But you can't apply that to your customers because, darn it, they're different. There are no defects when it comes to customers. They're just different. Okay? So at first it's a nuisance, but then you realize, wait a minute, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. This is great that we can go after these, we can find and go after these really valuable customers and create and extract so much value out of them that it's much better than trying to come up with a homogenized product for everybody. So it's not only acknowledging the differences across customers, saying, hooray, this is the way we can really break out of the pack. That's how Harris and Tesco's and all these other companies did it. All right, so it's acknowledging those differences, and it's acknowledging those differences on a really, really important basis. What kind of heterogeneity am I talking about here? Am I talking about skin color? Am I talking about gender? No, I'm talking about behavior. Okay, let's look at how the customers behave differently from each other and find behaviors that are more in line with our long-term interests and go after those customers and find more like them. That's what I'm talking about. And back to this point about looking backwards versus looking forwards. I want to emphasize that when we talk about customer profitability, we are not talking about the customers who have given us the most money. Now, granted, the customers who have given us the most money might also be reasonably well aligned with the ones who are likely to give us the most money in the future, but it's not a perfect one-to-one mapping. So we're going to use that historical data, but we're going to recognize that there's other kinds of customers out there. There's customers who haven't been very valuable yet, but they're emerging very, very quickly. Okay, kind of young superstars. Or the opposite, customers who used to be really, really valuable, but they haven't done much with us recently. They're not going to be as valuable to us in the future. So the past is only a fuzzy guide to the future. You need to do the math and use that historical data to make future projections, which, by the way, is what I do for a living. And if you're interested, quick little advertisement over here. Wharton's getting into this game in a big way. We realize that this is a competitive advantage for us is to build courses around it and teach students how to do it. The courses that I teach do it. We have a new executive education program. Come join me in San Francisco in January. Bringing customer lifetime value to life, practical methods and applications. Let's say this is mission critical to our business. It's not just a bunch of technical geeks who are doing it in the back room. CMOs, CEOs need to understand CLV really, really, really well. Because the tactics that could make customer centricity ultimately more profitable than product centricity are tactics that we know they've been around forever. It's just that they haven't been a priority for us. I'm talking about tactics like these: customer acquisition, retention, development. These are not new words. Companies have been doing this all the time. But the problem is, what makes someone a CMO? Or what does a CMO do all day long? Let's figure out which celebrity we should get to be a spokesman on a Super Bowl ad. Right? That's traditional CMO talk. And this other stuff is kind of nerdy and geeky and, come on, we got a business to run. And I'm saying that if you want to be customer-centric, you need to take these seemingly mundane tactics and elevate them. You need to be really, really smart about acquisition. And when I talk about smart, I'm talking about a very different kind of smart than most companies, especially online businesses, are doing today. What metric do online businesses obsess about when it comes to customer acquisition? They obsess about CPA. What's that? Cost per acquisition. We want to use Google-sponsored search and all this kind of stuff to drive our CPA down as low as possible. Let's be really efficient about acquiring customers. Let's get them even cheaper than we did before. And I say that's a terrible mistake. Terrible, terrible mistake. If you think about your customers as assets, and maybe not formal assets that you can put on our balance sheet, but they are assets, right? Then what kind of customers do you want to acquire? Good ones, not cheap ones. Think about other assets you acquire. Employees, lawyers. Okay, think about lawyers. She's a lousy lawyer, but she was cheap. Right? You laugh, but that's what most companies are doing with their customers. Okay, who cares? We don't know how good they are, but they're cheap. Let's just not waste a lot of money acquiring customers. Companies are taking pride in how little they spend, using technology to drive down the cost per acquisition as low as possible. I want to focus on the ceiling instead. Okay, I want to focus on the value that we can get out of customers. That's what lifetime value is. And decide how much of that should we spend to acquire that customer, and how much of it should we keep for ourselves and share with our shareholders. That's what the question should be. So I want to make customer acquisition not necessarily more efficient, driving the cost down. I want to make it more effective. I want to figure out who are the right customers, and I'm going to pay pretty much whatever it takes, or maybe not that much, but much more than I otherwise would be willing to pay to get the right customers. And that cost per acquisition is going to be so small compared to the upside potential that we get when we get those right customers in. Cost per acquisition is negligible compared to lifetime value. Okay, does it make sense? So, and I could go on and on and on, and I won't, about retention and development. All right, so you understand what retention is. It's not just a matter of, oh my gosh, this customer's about to leave, let's give him a discount. It's figuring out if this customer is worth it or not. Okay, I want companies to be really, really smart about which customers they're going to give the money back for the tires they didn't buy from you. Be smart about it, retention. You hear this saying all the time. Some of you have probably said it. It costs so much more to acquire a customer than to retain one, so we better really focus on customer retention. You've heard that? You've said that? I say that's idiotic. Okay? Because first of all, most of your customers are, what was the technical term I used before? Well, I didn't quite say that. I said, they're not worth that much. So yeah, you could retain them, but why? And again, I'm not saying you should chase them away, but don't roll out the red carpet for them. And as I just said, customer acquisition, okay, maybe it is more expensive to acquire a new customer than to retain an old loser. But it's worth it. Stop being so cheap. Go out there and get good customers because they're going to be worth it to you. So a lot of these old adages, which fit well with this product-centric mindset, got to just bring in as many customers as possible and push the products out to them, no longer apply. And this is a problem because companies don't necessarily have the DNA to handle these things. And then there's the organizational structure. Oh, Let me give you a very nice example of a customer-centric organizational structure. So what am I talking about here? I'm saying we figure out who the valuable customers are, okay? And let's wrap all of our products and services, including products and services that we don't even make a penny off of, around those valuable customers to make them even more valuable and figure out ways to extract the value from them. So here's a wonderful example of a company that isn't and shouldn't be high on the list of companies striving for customer centricity, but recognizing that they need to dip their toes in the water and start at least trying it out. The company I'm talking about is Procter & Gamble. And they have a number of initiatives. This is one of them over here, My Black is Beautiful, aimed at African-American women. Okay, so they're saying, that's our focal segment. And look at what they're doing, something that you almost never see. They're taking an array of different P&G products and advertising them together. We're going to surround you, the focal segment, with a bunch of different products and services. And in fact, we're even going to emphasize products and services that we don't even have anything to do with, recipes and music and so on. We want to show you, valuable customer, that we're your trusted advisor and we're going to be, one-stop shopping for you. We're going to go to our R&D department and come up with new products just for you, focal segment. So we're going to have our Queen Latifah line of CoverGirl cosmetics. This is what I'm talking about with customer centricity. Come up with that segment, surround them with all kinds of different stuff, develop new stuff for them. It's brilliant. It will fail. In other words, I'm giving P&G big kudos for this, but I also think this initiative will ultimately fail. Why? Skin color and gender. Okay? What should it be based on? Behavior. Okay? So I question their choice of segment. There's so much heterogeneity among African American women that to kind of say, here are the products and services for you, African American women, that's not going to cut it really well. So it's a very heterogeneous segment. I want it to be based on common behavior. Okay, but anyway, I still give P&G a lot of credit for at least trying. Okay, in addition to doing all their product-centric stuff, let's develop new blockbusters and all that, let's at least figure out a focal segment, and then surround them with products and services. Some are, some not, some new, some old. I want to see more companies trying to do that. Okay? Maybe again, just as a little side experiment, let's see if it works or not. Let's see what resources it requires. Let's see how much greater CLV we can create for that focal segment. I want to see this more often. Okay? Bottom line about living in the customer-centric world is this. Again, these words look very similar to words that I showed you before. The competitive advantage. Before it said product expertise, but now it says relationship expertise. And I want to be real clear about this. I'm not just talking about wishy-washy, feel good, we want to have a relationship with you, customer. No, I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about data. I'm talking about deep, meaningful insights. I'm talking about like the Harris story that we told before. Okay? And here's the cool thing about it. In the product-centric world, we've already lamented commoditization. We recognize that no matter how good we are, someone's going to be knocking off our great ideas very, very quickly. And those really smart customers aren't going to be as appreciative of our great ideas as they used to be. But when it comes to this kind of data-driven relationship expertise, no one can ever take that away from us. This is a lasting competitive advantage. So if you're smart and you figure out who the right customers are, and what are their hot buttons? What are the behaviors that are going to create more value and that can be extractable for us? No one can ever take it away. I see it as a much greater source of lasting competitive advantage, in some cases, than product expertise. Most companies aren't fully recognizing the value of that data. At best, they're using it in a way to do the product-centric thing more efficiently. I'm saying it needs to be different than that. Question?
Thank you. Can we keep the Nordstrom example? And I have two questions. If you have two students at Nordstrom, and they're not spending much now, but one of them is an MBA student and another one is an education student, how does Nordstrom know how to value them? And hold on,
yep.
And if they both end up being ticked off because nobody paid attention to them because they're not spending much and disappear, and then somebody at Nordstrom 5 years later would say, well, their customer lifetime value wasn't worth it, but you don't know what it would have been.
No, that's true. Okay, so let's start with that second question, that this lifetime value thing can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. That you ignore these customers, they have low value, and say, see, we did the right thing to ignore them. You're right about that, and I bet there's going to be a lot of companies that will be, or currently are, patting themselves on the back for being so smart. So that can be problematic. That that this whole CLV thing, it's basically, it's a betting game. And you could be wrong. To the first point, it's actually a similar kind of issue. Can we lump all MBA students into one basket and education students into another basket? Not necessarily, because there's plenty of heterogeneity even among MBAs. It's not the case that every MBA is going to be spending $1 bazillion at Nordstrom's or flying 1 bazillion miles. So it's not quite as simple as I might have suggested, but the overall point is, let's use whatever data we have to try to make forward-looking statements, and don't necessarily base it on the degree you're getting or the color of your skin. But let's look at telltale signs of your behavior, the kinds of products that you have bought in the past, okay, or other places where you've shopped, and maybe even where you are in a social network. Take whatever information we have. That's what big data is all about, is to fuse together a lot of these different sources to come up with a picture, but doing it on a customer-by-customer basis. Well, let me just show you one more slide, and then I'll be delighted to take more questions, because you want to see this slide over here. It's that chart that I showed you before. And again, I'll be very, very glad to send this to you. It's from a wonderful book called Designing the Customer-Centric Organization. Supposed to me, I'm just a data guy predicting things, and here's a strategy that fits well around the data. But how do you actually do it? How do you design the customer-centric organization? Don't ask me, ask him, okay? But I love the contrasts over here. Let me start with the one that I mentioned before. Instead of divergent thinking, we have this product expertise, what do we do with it? It's convergent thinking. Here are our focal customers. What array of products and services can we bring to them to make them more valuable and extract that value and find more customers like them? It is a completely different mindset. There's a lot of companies out there that are very, very product-centric, and then they just declare themselves customer-centric. We're going to love the customer now. We're going to be customer. No, you're not. And in fact, if you go up and down this list over here, there's every one of these points is a different reason why it's very, very difficult to do this. Not only is it a different mental process, a different organizational structure, different performance metrics, different kinds of customers that we're looking for and services that we're offering. It is very, very difficult to do this. It is very risky. And that's why I'm hedging my bets. And I'm not saying every company needs to be out there being customer-centric. I want companies to look over this list and say, can we do this? The answer might be no. But let's stay product-centric, at least for the time being. So this is in many ways a checklist, a set of barriers that will keep companies from moving in this direction. And let me just show you my very last slide, which just emphasizes these very same points. What are those barriers? The previous slide shows many of them. Availability of data and so on, organizational structure. And the bottom line is this question over here. Should you be doing it or not? And I'm leaving it as an open question. But all I want people to do is to make an informed decision about whether, when, and how to do it. And with that, let me take your questions. Please.
It sounds like you're institutionalizing what, when I learned marketing back in the ancient days, was good salesmanship. I mean, I remember I'd walk by a Nordstrom's and the sales guy would see me yell, "Rich, I know you like valleys and I got a new line in."
I am 100% with you. The ideas that I mentioned are not at all new. If you think about a company with just a few customers, you're selling some large B2B product, or you're private wealth management, you're already doing this. You're already treating different customers differently, and you know you're going to take the call from one billionaire and make this 100 millionaire wait. Okay, you're already doing that. Having that idea of having different relationships with different, that's why God invented golf, right? So all I want to do is exactly as you said, is I want to institutionalize it. I want to go to companies that have millions of customers instead of just tens of customers and treat them to do the same thing, using the data and technology as a proxy for what a smart salesperson would do. And I love salespeople. Okay, salespeople don't get enough credit in the organization. They're just told to execute things that the marketing people tell them to do. The salespeople want to build relationships. They want to make it for the long term and not for the quarterly numbers. So we can't blame the salespeople for this short-term mentality. If salespeople ran the show, they'd be doing these kinds of things. So those are really excellent points. In the back. Let's get the microphone over there.
I think the idea of focusing on sort of long-term profitability of a particular customer is really interesting, and the fact that you mentioned having to change incentive structures and the whole organizational structure around it is interesting. But how do you reconcile that with the fact that companies' value based on the street is still going to continue to be evaluated on quarterly earnings, meeting their revenue targets, and that sort of thing? And when you're looking sort of 3 or 4 years out as a salesperson and then as a CEO looking to build value, the street's not evaluating you on that performance.
I want to change what people on the street are doing. So in fact, my newest project, I'm glad to share it with you, is called customer-based corporate valuation. So instead of doing it the usual way, let's just get some aggregate revenue or EBITDA number and throw some BS multiple on it and say, boom, that's what the company's worth. Let's do customer valuation from the bottom up. Let's come up with the lifetime value of each and every customer and add that up, because in theory, that should be the value of the firm. So let's bring in customer metrics in a real serious way into corporate valuation. Not to the point where companies are going to be necessarily reporting lifetime values, although it's not out of the question, but providing investors with the ingredients so that the investors can do it themselves. So some of the kinds of numbers I'm talking about when it comes to acquisition, retention, and development. So that's why I'm trying to talk to the investors, to the CFOs, more than I'm talking to the CMOs. CMOs aren't going to listen. The CFOs might listen and might realize, you know what, this is actually a better way to value a business. So I'm actually spending much more time in that direction. I think that could be the source of change, much more than doing it through marketing. Great point. You have time for a couple of others? Let's see, let's start over here.
So Firestone comes into an affluent town and it sends out a bunch of coupons, whatever, for inexpensive oil changes. And all of a sudden, first they're doing a simple oil change in 15 minutes instead of bothering you to go to your fancy dealership. And then, by the way, you need some tires, and here's a nice low price on tires. And by the way, we also do this, and we also do that, and we also do the other thing. And all of a sudden, in 6 months, you're barely ever seeing your dealer and that local Firestone. You're doing everything there. You never thought of going to Midas. You never thought of going to any of those places. But now you're blowing all your money on however many cars you have at your local Firestone. What did they do right?
Well, that's
or
what I'm
Midas
talking
or
about.
anybody, you know.
So first of all, it's a wonderful example. We haven't said much about customer development, but taking these existing customers and deepening the relationship. Okay? And it's difficult. There's a lot of companies out there that feel, and a lot of this in financial services, by the way, that feel, let's just get a customer on board, and then we'll start doing a lot of cross-selling. You can't do that. You need to have a good value proposition to begin with, and then, oh, by the way, do some cross-selling. Cross-selling is basically icing on the cake. It's not cake. So you got to be really smart about it. So just adding on a bunch of services isn't necessarily going to work, but it's knowing which services for which customer at which time. Too many companies kind of paint a picture. Let's go back to financial services. And I don't mean to criticize them, because that's actually one of the more progressive industries in this evolution. But they have this mental model in mind about a customer. First, they're going to get a college loan, then they're going to get a car loan, then they're going to get a mortgage, then they're going to go to a home equity line, you know, kind of a lockstep series of services. And it doesn't work that easily. There's a lot of heterogeneity there about who gets which services when. So the answer to the question would be, and I'm not going to speak for Firestone, I don't know that much about them, it's just being really smart. It's celebrating, what is it that we celebrate?
Customers' needs.
No?
Not the customer's needs.
Well, sort of, but we celebrate the
customer
differences
value.
across customers. Different customers have different needs, and we're going to figure out which ones we want to really go after, right? And so if they're really smart about which customers who are more interested and susceptible to their range of services, then that's great, and maybe that's what they're doing. Okay, so it's finding customers who want to have that deeper relationship instead of trying to just push the same stuff on everyone. It's difficult. Another question, two rows back.
I would love to hear your insights on an industry where I feel like, as a customer, I'm being abused. And that is that I'm managing the long-term care insurance policy for an elderly parent. So obviously they've gotten the revenue for the last many decades and don't really have a lot of compunction about delivering good customer service.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare in general, again, it has the problem, for good reasons, or you know, I don't want to get political about it, is heavily regulated. And so it's tougher for those companies to just go out there and just do all of this stuff. And sometimes when they do, it seems kind of icky, and maybe they're going a little bit too far with it. I will say this, though. It's not exactly an answer to your question, but some of the companies that are trying to be the most progressive about this stuff are the pharma firms. they recognize that they can't rely on blockbusters forever. It goes back to commoditization and globalization, all the things that we're talking about. And they're trying to do some kind of pivot where let's, instead of just having a bunch of random, unrelated drugs and just hoping that each one's going to be a blockbuster, let's come up with one area and come up with a bunch not only of medications, but other services and so on that will be well suited for a particular kind of customer and be, trusted advisors. That, like back to the IBM story, there's going to be more money to being a trusted advisor than to selling pills. So there are some examples where companies in that broadly defined sector are making some steps in the right direction, but there's still a long way to go, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think it's true of most industries. Over here?
Could you apply this to a startup? Because by definition, they're a product company, right? Some guy comes up with an idea for a whizzy product that meets a need, but it would seem like from the get-go, if you could set up a customer-centric organization, you'd be...
Can we apply it to a startup? And the answer is yes, and I'm so delighted that so many startups, whether they're building the whole business around a focal customer or not, and there are many that are doing that, even if they're doing a product-centric thing, they're being just much more cognizant of this kind of stuff. And the VCs are starting to ask more questions about lifetime value and stuff like that. It was interesting. I just had a dinner with a VC firm just a couple of weeks ago, and the CEO of one of their portfolio companies basically apologized, said, we've been doing it 18 months now, and we're just now getting going on all that CLV stuff. And I'm thinking, this is great. This is amazing. So it is starting to become more second nature to startups. It just reflects the different generation that we're operating in. Not to say that that's uniformly true, because there are plenty of online or new businesses that just aren't doing this stuff at all. It just doesn't cross their mind, or they don't have the analytical capability to do it, or the nature of their business doesn't lend itself to it. But for the most part, yeah. And I'll tell you what, book number 2, right after this one, should be something like Customer Analytics for Entrepreneurs. So how do you build that infrastructure early on? What would be some of the early data that you're going to collect? What would be some of the early decisions that will be driven by that data? There's nothing like that out there now, and I think there's a crying need for it. Mm-hmm. Let's speak to the microphone a bit more.
Sorry. Can you speak a bit more about the ways company may misuse the data, meaning misinterpret the data in terms of the variance of
data
errors
issues.
in
This
terms
drives
of
me
what that may be.
crazy. Okay, I think companies are messing things up so badly before all this customer centricity stuff can happen. The stuff that's going on online, the things that companies are tracking and then using, they're doing it so stupidly. You've all had this experience. You go online, you're searching for a particular kind of pair of pants, and you go offline, you buy it somewhere at Nordstrom's. But then those pants follow you around the internet for the rest of eternity. There's behavioral retargeting. It is so stupid, it is so ineffective, and these online marketers are just so lazy that they have this technology, they have this capability, so let's use it. It's a big problem. And the issue is that regulators are going to step in and prohibit certain kinds of practices before they ever get a chance to really take root. The problem is that companies don't know, because they haven't read my book on Customer Analytics for Entrepreneurs, because I haven't written it yet, they don't know what kind of data they should be collecting and using. And so they're trying to collect and use everything, when 99% of it is useless. So it's being really smart and really selective about data that really will be predicting behavior, and kind of leaving some of the creepy sensitive stuff that's not that useful anyway, leaving it alone. If you're interested, follow me on Twitter. I just tweeted last week, I saw a wonderful article in Ad Age about this exact point, that this do not track legislation that's being discussed quite a bit, it's companies' own fault, because they're just so stupid and so not creative in what they're doing with their online behavioral data that they kind of deserve what the government will likely do to them. So very often, so my job is, let's come up with the best possible predictions using the least amount of data. And it's amazing at how well you can do in terms of forecasting CLV with very, very little data. And by the way, a lot of these patterns and methods that I'm referring to have been around for a long, long time, coming out of direct marketing and other industries that most people would say, well, we can't learn from them. So a lot of it's just being smart and efficient in the use of data And companies just aren't, they're not doing that really well. So it's a really key point and a very troubling point. One more over here. Then,
in the context of product development, it seems through much of the discussion that products are given.
there's one point I kind of skipped over there on my definition of customer centricity. See, here's the way product development usually works. We go to the folks in R&D and say, come up with the next blockbuster. You've been really good at coming up with other stuff. Come up with something new. What customer centricity tells us is, here are our really valuable customers. Then we go to the R&D people and we say, come up with something for them. Now, if you do that, you will be fired. Okay? You're not going to tell me what to do. I'm the R&D expert. But it's really, and it's not just going to the customer and finding out what the customer wants. It's celebrating heterogeneity and saying these customers are different. And stuff that's going to be good for them is going to be incredibly valuable. And then, by the way, the rest of the customers could buy it too. So that's what I'm talking about. I mean, it's truly customer-driven innovation, but heterogeneous customer-driven innovation. And that point is not quite as radical as I just made it sound. Because after all, why is it that those valuable customers have been so valuable? Because they love the stuff that the R&D people have been handing to them over the years. So there's already kind of a natural connection between what you're doing and what they like. So in some sense, if I were to go to you and say, just come up with something new because they're going to love it, we'd get the same result. But we're not going to do it that way. We're going to say, here's the people, let's really focus on them, let's come up with a new product or service that they want, please develop that for us. We might get to the same point in the end, I hope we will, but it's just that mental process that we are surrounding ourselves around those customers, and we want R&D to be well aligned with it, which they might be anyway. So that's kind of what I'm talking about there. And that's risky, and it's expensive, but I think that's a necessary part of really, really doing this stuff right. I really do appreciate your interest in some really excellent questions and observations. And, okay.